Hello, Wisconsin. Welcome to As Goes Wisconsin on this Tuesday, September 19th, my last Tuesday until baby comes.
Yes.
We got both Jane here. We got Greg here. Because this whole week, we're going to do the three of us as a transition to what everyone can expect for the next 3 months of you two being at the helm.
Exactly. I will be where you are.
Yep.
Starting on Monday.
In our new studio.
In our newish.
Same location.
Revamped.
Upgraded digs.
Yes, our upgraded digs. And Greg will be running the board. And so I will be acting as you with a lineup of co-hosts that will change from day to day. But Todd Alba from the Todd Alba Show will join on Mondays. Dominic Salvia from Devils will join me Tuesdays. Greg and I on Wednesday and Thursday. And then Carol Kane, the one and only, and my dear friend, is going to be joining me on Fridays.
I'm so interested to see how the show is slightly different depending on who the co-host is.
For sure.
How the topics will change.
Yep.
How the tone might change, how the jokes might change.
Oh, the jokes are going to get so much sweeter.
Are they?
No, I would never withhold the funniness from you, Kristen, in this time of
I'd hold that against you.
Babyosity.
Babyosity?
Babyosity, I like it.
Well, speaking of babyosity, at the top of the next hour, I'm so excited. I feel like this is a very topical, it's our article. It's a very popular article right now that's from the New Yorker, basically talking about why can't our friendship survive your baby? And
it's a great subject.
As two people, as one, right now, all three of us are childless. You two are two people who've chosen never to have kids. And I think probably are very much on one side of this article as far as experiencing changed or lost friendships over the years. I'm about to be on the other side of it, of friendships that change once you have a kid. And we would love to hear from you. This is at 11. Have you lost friends over being the people who had kids, or have you lost friends once they had kids? So I'm really excited to dive into that with you guys, because I think it's timely. To say the least. At least you guys can't get rid of me, though, because we work together. So even if you don't want to be my friend anymore, you still got to see me once I come back from maternity leave.
This is just a slow burn goodbye on us.
I sent it to friends last night. They're like, wait, are you breaking up with us already?
It's a pre-breakup warning.
So we're going to talk about that at 11. But this morning, first, happy National Voter Registration Day, guys.
Big day.
Yeah.
Big day.
Big day.
Yes.
So the election may be more than the presidential election may be more than a year away, but it's never too early to register to vote or to check your registration. So head over to myvote.wi.gov today, check your registration, maybe encourage someone else to vote.
Do we know if you're a 17-year-old who's going to turn 18 before the November election, is that something they can do now?
That's a great question.
I believe you can vote. Let me look into that. I will look that up.
Just to register. I'm not saying they can vote, but can they register now?
So they'll already be registered once they turn 18.
Exactly.
That I will look up for you. And here's an important piece of information from my time when I worked in the Obama campaign, which was actually a disenfranchise move. If you are currently on probation, papers, as they say, you got out of jail and you are on papers. If you are coming off of papers before an election, you can still register to vote. Your vote will be counted. You can vote even if you're on papers, as long as once you come off, it is before an election. If you're listening to this, tell someone you know. If you are on papers, know that. It's your right.
There you go. So happy National Voter Registration Day. We'll get through, if you know of any events that are happening today, feel free to let us know and we will announce them on air, 844-967-2789, because I know there's a lot happening in Milwaukee, but would love to hear more that's happening throughout the state to celebrate and try to get people to register to vote. All right, but the topic I wanted to start with today is basically the Wisconsin's big news from yesterday. After months of what's the holdup, the Wisconsin GOP finally announced a proposal for what their proposal is to keep the Brewers in Wisconsin. And it's a lot more expensive than it's basically double the cost of what Tony Evers' plan was. If you'll remember, Evers proposed giving the stadium district $290 million in state funding that was going to come from our state's surplus. which we still have because it was not all spent in the last budget. But now this deal, which is not, this is just a proposal. It's not been voted on. There's still room to negotiate it. It would still have to be signed. It would still have to pass and be signed by Tony Evers. But it's a $700 million proposal. So it's more than double.
Yeah.
To extend the Milwaukee Brewers at least until 2050, with the bulk of the funding coming from the state and local taxes, including, and then it would be $100 million from the team. So it's $600 million from the state and local, and it's $100 million from the team. And so the state's contribution would be covered by income taxes collected from the Brewers and visiting teams, because that is one thing I think is interesting. And so when players are visiting here, they get taxed prorated, like for whatever they make the day or the 3 days that they're here playing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so the taxes do come from the visiting players. So that would generate about $643.6 million over the length of the lease. But here's the thing that I think most people are having issue with. It double taxes people who live in the city of Milwaukee, because the only county or city that is on the hook for this to contribute is the city of Milwaukee and the county. So the 5 counties that were doing this, the stadium tax before, it's just Milwaukee County.
Yeah.
So they get hit twice, and it would be $7.5 million each year until 2050 when the lease expires, which in total would be $202 million that they'd have to cover.
Because Milwaukee County's fiscal problems are completely taken care of.
Yeah. So basically that would come from annual state shared revenue payments. And I have not done the math to know how much that takes out of the shared revenue that just went up.
Yeah. After many, many, many years.
After many years. And I don't know why. Because Greg, you don't live in Milwaukee County.
No, I live in Kenosha County.
Do you go to Brewers games?
Heck yeah.
Yes, you do.
I do. I try to go to at least 10 a season.
I would imagine a lot of people who live in Waukesha County, where we're sitting right now, also enjoy Brewers games. And it seems a little weird to me that someone who lives in Waukesha is going to pay the same amount for this stadium as someone in Vilas County or Rhinelander.
Sure.
And so it feels like they kind of got off the hook. But I want to hear from you. If you've looked at this deal, or based off of what we just summarized, who wins in this scenario? Who are the winners? Who are the losers in this GOP deal? 844-967-2789. Jane, what do you think?
Well, the Brewers are the winners.
Yeah.
When I saw this, that they're only paying $100 million, which should not be a surprise, but is immensely disappointing to me.
Because it's basically their current annual rent is $1.2 million, and this would increase it to $3.3 million, which
is not nothing.
Is not nothing.
I understand that. But again, they have more money than that.
And this is what's kind of tricky. So as I was driving in and I was thinking about this, and because the numbers are being run and it's, numbers are numbers. And so sometimes it's hard to keep it straight.
Yep.
But, money coming in, money coming out at the local level, at the county level, at the state level. What is the money coming in from keeping the Brewers? What is the money going out to pay for these renovations? And the one number that I feel like we don't know is the profit margin of the Brewers. Like, we know revenue, right? You looked up revenue.
Yeah, we looked up revenue, and in 2022, they made $295 million. And I told you that from 2001 to last year, with the exception of 2020 and 2021, it's been a steady, consistent increase.
But as we know, that's revenue, and they have to pay for salaries and of the players, salaries of the staff, like there's
health insurance.
Yes. They have an operating budget of about 23 to 25 million, but that doesn't include payroll.
So, but it seems hard to find is how much profit they actually are getting. And so how good of a deal is that for them, that their rent only goes from 1.2 to 3.3 million? they still get a new stadium. They don't have to go through the rigmarole of moving, even though they kind of act like it's such a favor for them to stay
Well, they always
because we're
do.
such a small market.
No one
Yeah.
else would want to come here.
If you don't give us what we want, we leave.
Exactly.
And we'll cry and wipe our tears off
We
with our
want to
dollar
stay.
bills.
Why won't you just let us stay?
Yeah. It's the equivalent of saying we're not mad, we're just disappointed. We don't want to leave.
So we would love to hear from you of what you think about this bill. Granted, this is not signed, sealed, and delivered yet.
No.
This is just a proposal. But compared to the original deal that may be DOA, but the pay for future renovations versus something that puts the state and then the city and county of Milwaukee predominantly on the hook for this. Better deal? Who wins? Who loses? 844-967-2789. Greg, do you have you had strong thoughts about this when we talked about it previously?
I had strong thoughts, but we have about a minute and a half left. So we could probably talk about when we come back from the break.
Okay.
But
tease your thoughts?
I had strong thoughts, got more information, changed some ideas, but I still have strong thoughts, especially now on Robin Voss's plan versus a more fiscally responsible plan. That's what we can go in the next segment.
All right, good tease. And then coming at the bottom of the hour at 10:30, Dan Shafer is going to be here to recombobulate. We'll also ask his opinion on the Brewers. But then that special session comes tomorrow. What are the chances? What are the odds? Gavel in, gavel out. Any bet takers? Anyone?
8 seconds.
This is As Goes Wisconsin. We'll be right back. Bry. Welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin. I am Kristen Bry. We got Greg Bach on the board and Jane Matnair as my co-host for the week.
Yay!
New configuration as we I wind down my last couple days before I let you guys take over my baby. My first baby.
Your first baby, exactly. This baby has a little more emotional connection.
I would think so.
Yeah.
Although I have been warned that the first couple months, you love them a lot. They don't give you a lot back besides poop.
Well, yeah, I'm sure.
There's not a lot of
Mama.
Yes, there's a lot of just I'm crying. I need to be fed. I need
Why
to be
won't
changed.
you help me?
Please let me sleep. And it's like not a lot of personality coming back at you yet.
I have a feeling between the Samson Brime, collaboration here.
I like that term. I
Thank
like
you.
that we've collaborated.
I was trying to think of a really non-gross term, but the collaboration between the Samson
Union?
Bride. There it is. You're gonna get a charming, outgoing baby at a very young age. They're gonna be
Okay.
outgoing with their eyes and whatever.
Could you imagine if we birthed an introvert?
That would be wild.
Wouldn't that be wild?
That would be wild.
Mom,
if this kid is shy and
Mom, I have
just,
something
just
to
like
tell
I don't
you.
like people.
I'm an introvert.
I know.
I still love you. It'll be hard.
Speaking of that, previewing ahead to Friday, Michael Sampson, my husband, was actually going to be here. We're going to do the same thing we did right before we got married and take your calls on advice. It's solicited advice.
People asking for your input.
Me asking for your input
Right.
as the audience of advice to first-time parents before we head out into the wilderness. So that's coming up on Friday. If you want to look forward to that, we would
Share
love to hear
your
from
wisdom.
you. Yeah,
Share your wisdom.
I can't wait to see him.
I know. He was like an hour. I was like, you did 2 hours with me before. He's like, that's a long time.
That's nothing, Samson.
I
Come
know,
on.
I know. He'll be fine. All right. Well, back to the topic at hand. We're talking about the GOP's proposal for the Brewers stadium renovations and what they think is the best solution to keep the Brewers in Milwaukee, in Wisconsin, which includes it's a $700 million deal overall until the year 2050.
Twice as expensive as the one proposed by Governor Evers.
And comes from tax dollars instead of the surplus, which technically is tax dollars, but it's kind of money that is sitting there right now that has not been plugged for anything yet because of what happened during the budget process earlier this year. And so we're asking you, who are the winners and the losers if this deal were to move forward? Again, it still needs to be voted on. There's a chance that there's not any Democrat votes on this.
Right.
There's also a chance that there's no fiscal conservative votes on this either.
Well, I was going to say, is this not wildly irresponsible for Popcorn King Robin Voss to put forward a bill like this that's twice as expensive as the original one?
I disagree. I think he is trying to get all the wins he can right now, and for him, wins aren't legislation going through. They're just these announcements because they get the attention he wants. I mean, last week it was all about the maps. He said we're going to do this thing with the maps, and people were losing their minds saying how amazing it was. Like he's just looking for attention. While we were talking about before, slipping in very nefarious pieces of legislation under our noses that, while getting reported, aren't as sexy as baseball and fair maps and lawsuits.
I don't know. I feel like if I were to make a TikTok about this other headline right now, so the other thing that we're talking about that maybe got pushed down below the Brewers announcement yesterday is Robin Voss is trying to block 34,000 UW employees from getting their pay raises until every single DEI position at every UW campus is fired.
And DEI, for them not knowing,
diversity, equity, and inclusion.
There it is.
And why does Robin Voss have the power to institute what policies our university systems have?
Well, because it's a publicly
funded
institution. And it's the same reason, because they already cut $32 million from the UW budget. What got line item vetoed by Evers was that it had to come from DEI. And so now the next move is, well, no one gets a raise then until this program is gone. So that slipped under the radar.
But guess what, everybody?
We're highlighting it.
But guess what? The Popcorn King saved baseball at a deal twice the price.
And while sticking it to Milwaukee, the city of Milwaukee, and Milwaukee County,
which is everything he wants.
Yeah,
everything
after
he wants.
After the wins of shared revenue and the sales tax.
Yeah,
and I'm not saying that the money that would come out of our shared revenue to both for the county and for the state or for the city negates it, but it is a chunk, right?
Oh, yes.
Like $7.5 million every year is a lot of other things that could get paid for. In fact, John Johnson, who's been on the show before, and he has actually been in the rounds right now because he has thoughts on the amendments that were made to the MAPS legislation that was passed last Thursday. But he tweeted out last night, the amount of money the Wisconsin legislature is demanding the city of Milwaukee give the Brewers could replace roughly 250 lead service lines each year.
Yep. I mean,
wow.
You could go down the line of all the things you could do to help people. And yeah, once again, this is just the Popcorn King waving his scepter of destruction and punishment because we live in cities and areas that don't vote for him and don't like him because he's petty.
I mean, I think there's a lot of areas that don't like him.
Oh, absolutely.
Isn't his approval rating like 12%?
Oh, yes.
Like he is.
That never seems to make any difference when it comes to vote totals, however.
No, I mean, he's in a safe district. I mean, people in his district like him. In that position, that's all that matters. You don't have to have statewide approval.
Right.
But he is very, very low when it comes to statewide approval.
And he wins very low vote margins. I mean, it's just, he's.
All right.
That's the official word.
The official word from Greg Buck. All right. Well, when we come back, Dan Shafer will be here to recombobulate. We'll ask him about the Brewers. If you have any texts or thoughts on the Brewers Stadium, we will also take that. 844-967-2789. We'll ask him about the special session that's coming tomorrow. We'll ask him about the legislation maps amendments from last week. Got a lot to talk about. Everything, everywhere, all at once. This is As Goes Wisconsin. Wisconsin. I am Kristen Bride. We got Greg Bach on the board. Gene That Nair is also here. And that music means it is time for recombobulating with Dan Shafer on Tuesdays. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you?
We're doing fabulous. We are tech trouble free so far today, which we're very excited about. Knock on wood.
But words are hard.
Words are hard, but that's okay. So we're very happy. We're very happy to see you. And I referenced your tweet from last week as far as the chaos of Wisconsin politics, better explained as everything, everywhere, all at once.
I love that.
It's been wild.
It has been a news avalanche these last few days.
Feel like
I'm frankly a little discombobulated, Kristen.
I mean, I feel like I have very little grasp besides reading headlines on what's happening nationally right now. because I've been trying to keep up with what's happening in Wisconsin. But the stuff with McCarthy and impeachment, and I know a little bit about Boebert trying to give an HJ in a movie theater or in a theater.
Bobo, baby.
Say what you want. That was hot.
But for the most part, stuff that's happening at the national level, it's like, I don't have time for this because there is so much happening here. So the newest news, we'll quickly get your opinion on the Brewers news from yesterday, because I know you've not only have thoughts about this, but you also you had one of your first, I think it was really one of your first guest posts was about a beer district. And so you've been talking about this for a while as far as what could reimagine the stadium freeway, the beer district, the Brewers, how this symbiotic relationship can work. So at least with what the proposal was yesterday, feelings about it.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of expected what was going to happen, that, the initial proposal from Evers was just state money. Voss and company wanted there to be local dollars, and I think that is so far the biggest problem with it, is that, we just had this long debate over shared revenue. And just after we get Milwaukee on sound financial footing with this shared revenue proposal, Mayor Johnson talking about it in his budget address this morning, right after that, they're coming back for more money for the stadium to be pulled out of that shared revenue. I think that's a little bit frustrating, and just the lack of aim for larger transformation for that area. I think one of the things that worked well about the Bucks Arena deal was that it wasn't just about building the arena. It was about transforming a part of downtown Milwaukee and building the beer district and fostering all of these other different developments that we've seen on the west side of downtown that has made a real difference, and it is rippling out throughout the city, and has really been a good investment. Like, not I'm not one of these people who said all arena investments are bad. That's a point a lot of people can take, and it's a legitimate one. But I think you can be pragmatic about this, and you can get to a better solution that is going to be transformative for a region, and not just provide upgrade and maintenance for the stadium, but to have a larger impact on the city. And I think we're seeing a little bit of that reaction since the deal was proposed. Mayor Cavalier Johnson was pretty vocal in comments made yesterday about support for something like a beer district, which was something that we first wrote about at the recombobulation area. A guest column from Robin Palm there got a lot of positive attention. But yesterday, Rick Schlesinger from the Brewers was talking about they want to preserve tailgate culture. Don't want to mess with tailgate culture. They have more parking spots than there are at Disney World in Florida, and that can't be messed with. 80 games a year, 80 home games a year, but another 200 some days that those lots are empty. Can't mess with that tailgate culture, though. So I thought that was a little frustrating.
Well, why couldn't you have
both?
Well, yes, and have a lot or two that is for tailgating, and then reallocate some of this other space. I don't understand that.
Neither do I, Jay.
Well, they also have this. They also have an opportunity. They're right across 175. There's the Komatsu plant. They have since moved to the Harbor District in Milwaukee. That plant is now vacant. So why not engage with them and talk about redeveloping that area into something else, or using this space around the Menominee River that they don't use at all to create some sort of year-round space for people, whether it's an entertainment district, whether it's something specific to the game. Like there's so many different creative approaches that we could take, and basically all they're doing is saying, give us $600 million for maintenance and upgrades. Like it just doesn't fit when you're making that type of investment.
When you're trying to be like the opportunity to think outside the box instead of just doing more of the same.
Exactly.
I mean,
we're not going to change the city if we keep doing more of the same.
There could be a wonderful mashup with the Potawatomi casino and the Brewers in that whole area. You've got all that space, and
Potawatomi, the Harley Museum, there's a lot of opportunity there that people have not really seized. And I think if you think of this as a way to transform the west side of Milwaukee. Of course, I'm going to advocate also in there for removing the stadium freeway, freeing up some area there to.
You just want to get rid of all the roads, Dan Shafer, all the roads.
He just wants to ride a horse.
I was going to say, bring back horses. Bring back horse and buggies.
But I think one of the things you tweeted yesterday was, in one breath, yesterday, the GOP lawmakers, or some of the GOP lawmakers, are going to support spending $600 million on a stadium. And likely tomorrow, they will gavel in and gavel out from spending any money on workforce-related policy initiatives, primarily childcare, paid leave. And that is a good point, I think, as far as where does this money, where do we want to put our priorities?
Hey, you show me one of those moms who's got a good RBI, we'll talk.
What's your pitching speed, baby?
Yeah.
Come on,
Yeah.
pick it up a little bit.
My gosh, spring training's right around the corner.
Exactly. We'll work something out.
And so that is happening tomorrow. So, I mean, this was over a month that we knew that this special session was coming, that was called by Governor Evers last month, as far as I think it's being labeled as workforce initiatives and trying to bolster our workforce with, and what am I missing there? So it's paid leave, childcare. What else are they potentially supposed to be talking about?
Yeah, there's some higher education investments, including that engineering building at UW-Madison, and some workforce development initiatives for people in the healthcare and education field as well. But I think that, the highlight item is childcare, and the funding for childcare counts. And I think every expectation is that they are going to gavel in and gavel out of this special session. And I just really hate that as an approach. I really hate that that has been normalized over the last 4 years. In this era of divided government that we have in Wisconsin, where the governor will call a special session and the Republicans will gavel in and gavel out in seconds. That's not what we want as Wisconsinites. We want people to come and engage on the issues. And I think this is such a big topic. It was so maddening to the way that Republicans voted this out of the budget in a session at 2:30 in the morning. And I really have to commend Tony Evers for really going to bat for working families, going to bat for workforce. And it's just so frustrating that the inevitable brick wall that they're going to be running into is going to be the gavel in and gavel out. If you want to make a difference for Wisconsinites, just have the conversation. If you don't want to fund childcare this way, make your argument. It's not, there are reasonable arguments to be made to not fund things. I happen to think it's a bad one. I think we have to be pragmatic about this. We have to, look at the fact that, between 25 and 50% of childcare providers in the state could close within the next year without new funding like this. And not just be so ideologically rigid and say, well, this was pandemic era funding, so we're not going to continue any kind of pandemic era emergency funding. But just have the conversation. Just have the conversation.
Represents a conservative organization, and the argument for being what is the political move of why this, why do they continue to do this? Why won't they just have the argument? I don't know if you'll have an answer, but I feel like the opportunity to at least hear a rationale from someone who is not on the same aisle as all of us, it will be interesting. But I think I agree with you, Dan, and I think most people. And we asked this question last week, and I would love to, as we talk about everything that's been happening in the last week, Dan, when the rushed proposal for maps came out last week, and there was the political spin of it. I was like, oh, this is Iowa style. But there was one glaring piece where it's well, but we can still amend it however we want. But there were amendments, and that I feel like has gotten less press and been less talked about of what amendments were passed last Thursday night going into what the bill looks like now. It's still not perfect. There are some improvements. There may be some signs of negotiation. When we talk about Wisconsin government, I asked this question last week. Like, what do you think it's going to take as far as like whoever is going to be the bigger person? Like, I asked the question as far as was it the right move for Governor Evers just to immediately say no and not at least have the conversation with Robin Voss? Granted, how much trust has been broken, but at least even call his bluff to be like, all right, how serious are you? Like, where do you think we're at as far as where, like, how we stop playing these games because no one trusts each other when it comes to our government?
That's a tough question. I think it's going to take more than just one special session or one, redistricting proposal or anything
Yeah.
like that. I think it's going to, there's been such a long-term breakdown in trust in state government. I think so much of that comes back to Assembly Speaker Robin Voss and the approach that he's taken as the longest serving assembly speaker in our state's history. And I think people will see the proposals that he brings forth, and there's always another shoe to drop every time he brings something forward. And I wrote about this last week at the recombobulation area, where it was this Iowa style redistricting proposal that very carefully omitted very key portions of the Iowa model. And had a bipartisan response from people in Iowa saying this is not the Iowa model.
Yeah.
So I think it's examples like that continue to lead to that breakdown in trust. And it's just like, maybe if he would have introduced the exact bill that Tony Evers introduced in 2021 on nonpartisan redistricting, now we're getting somewhere. Right? Like that's what was negotiated over years with Fair Maps advocates and trying to get people from both sides of the aisle engaged in nonpartisan redistricting. And there have been examples. There was another bill that didn't get a public hearing in the last session from Deb Andraka and Senator Jeff Smith. Bring back that bill. Have a public hearing on that. Rushing this through with no public hearing with this Swiss cheese proposal that, idiots like me can poke holes in so easily is not the solution.
And me and my little videos can break it down. So
Oh, burn.
Nice.
Although I did see, as a follow up to that, I'm referencing Rick Essenberg calling my videos,
Little.
quaint.
Yeah.
He did also go after Craig Gilbert, and Craig Gilbert also, who's one of the most objective, veteran political reporters in Wisconsin, saying the maps are rigged. And Rick Essenberg said, well, actually. All right, we got to take a break. Dan Shafer will still be here when we come back. This is As Goes Wisconsin.
Yeah. Get up. Yes, here we go again, give you more, nothing lesser. Back on the mic is the antidepressant. And rock, no pressure, yes, we need this. The best is yet to come in, yes, believe this.
Welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin. I'm Kristen Bry. We got Greg Bach on the board, Jane Matnair, and Dan Shafer, who we are recombobulating with because it is Tuesday between 10:30 and 11, and that's what we do here. And what we'll continue to do here, even when I'm gone next week. And so, Dan, we have a caller, actually. Bill from Economowalk, I think has something to say about gaveling in and gaveling out. Bill, what do you have to say?
Good morning. A great topic. By the way, big question. We don't have to tolerate a child who is spoiled, who thinks they can control our government by pulling that. I think we ought to put them on notice. Next time you do that, we are going to deal with your lack of ability to represent the state of Wisconsin. They've broken laws, and I'll help you out right away. They take an oath of office to protect from foreign and domestic
Enemies.
problems. Enemies. Thank you very much. They also the 14th Amendment, Section 3, would make them even obsolete to run again. But we don't have enough Democrats that get in their face. The next time, if I was sitting in that room when that happened, said, sirs, you've gavelled out. You might have gavelled out of your position. We are going to work to remove you from your office because you're not following the rules of order for running a public office. You made a choice. Now you're going to have to deal with it. We should deal with it. Thanks so much for letting me rant. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Bill.
We always appreciate it, Bill.
Bill wins the Spicy Caller of the Week award. We got a text from the 414 saying Evers should set up a special session twice a week.
The beatings will continue until morale improves.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Yes.
So that
Yes.
was actually something I wrote about in 2020 when Republicans were gaveling in and gaveling out of all of the different, pandemic-related special sessions that year. Is that Governor Evers should just keep calling special sessions until they start to do their job. I wonder if that's it's kind of a radical approach, but so is gaveling in and gaveling out of a special session without having any conversation about it.
Yeah.
Well, but they've just gotten away with this for so long. They just have. Life is good. We do what we want. We don't have to respond.
But were they doing this? Because this was before I got back in 2020. Like in when Governor Evers took office in 2019, I guess it was really only 1 year before the pandemic. And like that was all of the health orders were coming down and it's like, do something. But what was 2019 like? Was this still a thing then?
Do you remember, Dan?
I do. So the first, because I wrote about this at the recombobulation area, the first time that they called a special session and gavelled in and gavel out was in relation to gun violence prevention. So they called a special session. They had it was kind of similar to this year where they had, the budget talks and they, got to the agreement and vetoed things out of the budget and blah, blah, blah. And kind of, that was a year that saw a number of school shootings and things like that and mass shootings. And so Governor Evers called the special session in late 2019. And that was the first time that Robin Vos and Wisconsin Republicans took this radical approach of gaveling in and gaveling out. And I think, since then, I believe it has happened somewhere around a dozen more times. I think a couple times that they've gavelled in and just like quietly gavelled out several days later. I think that happened a couple times over the course of the pandemic. Only once has it actually produced, a signed bill. I believe that was on unemployment insurance kind of post after the 2020 election. But this is something that Wisconsin Republicans have done now. It's somewhere around a dozen times on so many issues, on abortion, on voting rights, on, pandemic efforts, public health. It's such a frustrating approach. I think this type of approach that we're seeing from Wisconsin Republicans is why they continue to lose in statewide elections. I don't know if there's any polling out there on these gavel in, gavel outs. I get the sense that people hate them. The Wisconsinites just want to see their leaders have the conversation. If you disagree, fine. We can disagree without being disagreeable, but have the conversation. These are really important issues. We talked when they had the 2:30 a.m. session on childcare. They didn't really say anything about why they were voting childcare counts out. We had sessions last week on these other childcare bills that Republicans proposed, which at best get to fringe issues on the issues of childcare. So I think they're going to try and say that, oh, well, we tried to do something with these bills saying deregulating the way that 16-year-olds can care for toddlers and things like that. That's going to be their solution.
High school?
Exactly.
Sorry.
And I think they're going to say, well, we passed these bills. We passed these bills through assembly. We did something, but that's just not even getting close to what the issue actually is. And I think, we're really going to be staring down a crisis for working families in Wisconsin when, as many as 25% to 50% of centers close as people continue to leave the workforce, as rates continue to rise for parents where it costs more than a mortgage payment, costs more than college tuition. This is going to be a real problem for Wisconsin going forward if we do nothing. And the childcare counts would stabilize the industry. It wouldn't solve the whole problem. But what's their other option? What's the other option? To
deregulate.
To deregulate.
Yeah.
Well, and I ultimately, though, because I always get conflicted about this in what their ultimate goal is. And it's like, well, we want to get women back in the house, back in the kitchen, back with their babies. On the flip side, nobody wants to work anymore. Everybody's lazy. Come on, what's wrong with you people? Which is it?
Well, they get to do nothing and then wrap it around personal responsibility and look like the heroes every single time.
It's always a game of heads I win, tails you lose when it comes to Wisconsin Republicans.
Yep.
Regardless, I do wonder, as you were saying that, Dan, do you think that Charles Franklin and the Marquette Law School poll has a request line of things that we can ask them to please poll on?
If not, they should.
They should.
Is a hot dog a sandwich?
Charles, will you please, on the next poll on whether or not we should gavel in and gavel out, and how the average Wisconsinite feels about it?
Love it.
I always, every time there's a new poll, I annoy John Johnson from the Marquette poll, who's part of that, to leak me numbers. Maybe I'll start giving him requests for things to poll.
Maybe he's like, all right,
A request
I get
line.
you can't give me the numbers. Can I at least submit my my request for the next one?
A request line. I
Blink
love it.
twice if I'm right.
All right, Dan Shafer from the recombobulation area. You should subscribe. You should subscribe for free. You should pay him because he does unbelievable work. Go check out the recombobulation area. Dan Shafer will be back even when I'm not next week. Thanks as always, buddy.
Thank you, Kristen.
Have a great day.
Take care.
When we come back, have you lost friends from having kids? Have you lost friends when your friends had kids? We're going to talk about it on the other side of the break. Stick around for the top of the hour news. This is As Goes Wisconsin.